Now, given the choice, where would you rather be on a bank holiday weekend? Blackpool? Well, maybe. Essex, where Bill, our missional pastor, is visiting one of our prayer support groups? No, I'm happy to stay here in Northumberland. This beautiful place, this great location, but an area of great spiritual need. Our prayer in Crossingplaces is that the area that is so beautiful will once again become beautiful in spirit. Because this land just south of the Scottish border and the River Tweed was once known as the cradle of Christianity. It was through the Celtic saints that the good news of the gospel came, and they not only reimagined a different way of living Christianly in the world, in forming communities, but through their message, which was their life, as well as that which they taught and shared, they brought about some transformation to European culture. Of course, that's times past, and the situation is very different now. We're very much in a post-Christendom context. The church is in major decline. I am about one of the youngest people in my 50s who has any affiliation with any of the churches in the Glendale area. There are just over 6,000 people who live in Glendale. It's a very remote rural region with a number of villages and hamlets, and yes, a town of Wooler, which is the main focal hub of Glendale community. It's an area of great opportunities and under tourism. There are all kinds of new initiatives, but it's an area facing major challenges, not least in the economic climate in which we find ourselves. The government cutbacks will majorly impact, and things like the closure of libraries and the shutting down of subsidies for rural transport will have some fairly devastating impact upon our communities. 2 years ago, through a chance conversation in a coffee shop on Wooler High Street, just over the road from where my wife and I live, has come a missional initiative, Crossingplaces in Glendale. What are we about? What are we seeking to do? What we're about is seeking God and trying to listen to His heartbeat and look for signs of His presence in the culture that is all around us. Our endeavour is to plant or replant the Christian gospel, the story that shapes not only individuals but can transform communities in which we live. The spirituality that those Celtic saints brought many years ago was shaped by the Johannine tradition, the image that we see in John's Gospel of a God who loves the world so much, not just the religious and the ritual and the people of Israel, but actually the God who loves the world, the God who comes and pitches his tent among his people, dwelling among them full of grace and truth. The image of God seen in Jesus in John's Gospel, who relates to people beyond the religious, beyond, if you like, the church, beyond the boundaries and barriers that sometimes we create through our religious practices and protocol. This is what Glendale Crossingplaces is all about. It's actually about taking God's story beyond the walls of the church into the heartland of the communities and the various peoples of this changing rural area. We're not so much about planting a church. We're actually about planting the gospel and allowing the gospel in a rural context to govern and inform the shape and nature of the missional community or church as it becomes. We're asking questions about what does the good news of the gospel mean in a culture like this? So, for example, in an area where there is desperate low aspiration among the young people, and very few, a tiny minority of young people go on to higher education in Glendale, we're saying, what does the good news of Jesus mean for people who have low self-esteem, low aspiration? Surely the good news is about becoming fully human, about entering into life in all its fullness, about encountering and relating to God, to self, to others and the world around us in the way in which God intends and reflects the values of his heart and his kingdom. Glendale Crossingplaces is about asking questions about what it means to live following Jesus as missionary disciples in a changing post-Christendom rural context. It was a year ago now when we issued, a very small group of us, just 11 of us, an invitation with the help and support of Home Mission to come and be our missional pastor. The word missional pastor is a definition for Bill, but it's not a term that would be used in Glendale because people wouldn't have a clue what you meant. But what we did do is we called a man who cared, a man who carried something of God's heart for people. And he's been on a terrific journey of transition, moving out of the familiar. I mean, he doesn't run a church any longer. He doesn't have services, meetings, programs. I mean, I've caught him on occasions putting his coat on at 7:10 and then realising he hasn't got anywhere to go. So it's been a huge learning curve for Bill, but working well with the core group here of some 10, 11 of us, we've been learning what it is to be available to people, to taking the good news out onto the streets, to being there for people, to listen not only to God's heartbeat in the culture, but listening to people's heartbeats and caring and responding, not simply trying to get people to fit in to what we have created. Creativity, imagination, experimentation, exploration, these are all the characteristics of a missional initiative. This is not Christendom model of mission. This is not us kind of creating something and then saying to everybody, this is what we've got, you come to us. This is pioneering, quite prophetic, a little bit apostolic, building the kingdom of God, breaking new ground, and trying to discover in some small way what it means to follow Jesus in this changing Glendale environment. For Bill, what does he do? He makes himself available for people. He gets involved in some of the regeneration programs. He's involved, for example, in Sure Start, in a catering course that is going to start in the early summer. He's hoping to establish Grow Zones, which is a gardening scheme which brings together people of skill and unskilled, people who can't cope with their gardens, others who want to learn about gardening, who've got time on their hands. And by so doing, not only learning skills to do with gardening and horticulture, but actually life skills. And in the process, building community across ever increasingly fragmented society in which we live. On Fridays, he gets thrashed at Domino's by the men of the sheltered housing scheme. Why is he there? Because he cares. Why is he there? Because those men are loved by God. And in the conversations and getting thrashed in Domino's are opportunities, crossing places, bridges over which the love of God can travel and reach the hearts of people. So thank you to Home Mission for supporting us, and thank you for the Baptist family for being aware of us, because we are in the very far northeast of England and it does feel at times remote and isolated, but it's good to know the companionship and partnership of brothers and sisters who will stand with us in what is a very exciting, creative, imaginative new initiative, planting the gospel, seeing what emerges, praying that God's kingdom comes and that transformation may come to this community, not only touching the lives of individuals, but actually bringing about a regeneration to the area that was once this cradle of Christianity, that it now may once more become a beacon of light for Christ and his kingdom.